guys, how's it going? I hope you are all doing really well out there. Today I'm going to be discussing the books I read in May. I did have a pretty decent reading month as far as the number of books I did get through. I had, I think, 13 books I read, and then I have 4 books I did DNF. Typically what I do is I start from the bottom, least favorite, work up to favorite. I am going to start with those 4 DNFs, and then we'll get into the books I actually finished. So first book on the list is The Darkest Part of the Forest by Holly Black. I did read I think it's called the Folk of the Air series by this author, the Cruel Prince series, which I did really enjoy. I was excited for this one because it is a standalone fantasy novel and it is about the Fae, supposedly when they are being exceptionally tricky and kind of dark and manipulative, which I really like that. However, this just ended up being not for me. I only got a few chapters in, I will say, so it could very well have changed after that. It just, the way the book started, it was immediately, there was like this high school party, everyone was drunk, and there was drama about like, oh, who's kissing who and stuff. And even when I was in high school, I felt like that was too juvenile for me. So at the age where I am now reading it, I'm just especially like, I don't care about all that drama. So unfortunately, that one was a DNF. Next, we have John Dies at the End. This sounded compelling. It's actually about 2 guys, I think, who dropped out of college, who are demon hunters. And something happens where they're thrust into the spotlight and they have to end up either saving their town or the world or saving something. The way that it is written, like, to you, warning you, I really liked. However, it became pretty obvious that the humor in it was really juvenile. It's kind of like a 12-year-old boy humor, which I'm not about that. So I really didn't give this one much of a chance. I just have so many books that I do really want to get into that I'm not as willing anymore to spend so much time on a book that I don't think I'm going to enjoy anymore as it goes along. So that's the second DNF. Third, we have A Wolf at the Table. If you watch my last unhaul, I think, I got rid of Dry by this author. I've tried reading like 3 of his books. I think they're kind of like autobiographical. I think I figured out it's just his writing style I just don't mesh with very well, so that one's gonna go. And then last DNF was Magic Bites. I know this is an important series. I think it's like a 10-book series to a lot of people out there. I have read a lot of books lately where the main protagonist is kind of this streetwise, tough, kind of always has a comeback, smart mouth, quippy kind of person. I've just read so many of those characters lately that I was not in the mood. Okay, next we're going through the books I did get through. Last on the list, we have Squirrel Seeks Chipmunk. I did not like this book at all. I'm sorry. This is a Dave Sedaris book, which this is the first Dave Sedaris book I've read. I do have a few of his other novels. If you do enjoy his novels, please let me know if this is kind of typical Dave Sedaris or if this was something maybe out of left field. Because this was supposed to be funny and I just did not find it humorous. It's pretty much short stories about how awful people are, but instead of people, it's animals. And I guess that's supposed to make it comical. I did not find it funny. I found it like super depressing. Yeah, it wasn't for me. Next we have I'll Never Get Out of This World Alive. This is a really, really random book. First of all, look at that cover. That's a cool cover. I can't have a video without at least one saying, look at that cover. This is about a man who's a doctor. I don't think we ever learn his name. We just call him Doc. He lives in a town in Texas, kind of a down on its luck town, full of down on their luck people, mostly drug dealers and prostitutes. He used to be a physician. I think he lost his the ability to perform medicine when it became obvious that he was like addicted to morphine, I think it is. One day he meets a 16-year-old girl called Graciela or Gracielda, I'm not sure. Helps her out. She stays with him for a while. They supposedly form a kind of strong bond attachment. There's something a little bit different about her. She's having an impact on the town and the people living in there, and it turns out that she can like heal people supernaturally. It wasn't bad. I just didn't really get anything from it. I think the author does a really good job of portraying people who have done really terrible things, but not showing them as terrible people, showing both sides of them. Doc is haunted by the ghost of a man that he may have killed. The relationship between Doc and Graciela, we're told, is really close, but we're never really shown. It didn't really have any sort of impact on me. I'd never heard of it before. I just picked it up purely because of the cover, so, but hey, at least I read it. At least I know now. Next book on the list, we have The Dinner by Herman Koch. I'm not sure how you pronounce his last name. Oh boy, this book. I think they just made this into like I don't know if it's a Netflix movie or something like that. We focus on a couple, a man and a woman. They're meeting another couple, his brother and wife, at a really fancy restaurant. And the first third of the book, the only thing we're pretty much told is that this is a really fancy restaurant and the wine is really particular and the serving sizes are too small and the waiters are too friendly, and it's just being inside this man's head who wants to complain about every little thing, who thinks that this place is like catering, obviously it's catering to the rich and stuff, but thinks himself so above it, judging it the whole time. He's incredibly annoying. He's meeting his brother, who is an important person politically in the country. They're having a dinner because their sons, who are like 15 or 16 year old, who are both 15 or 16 years old, have done something bad. We don't know what it is. It's kind of alluded to, and then as the story goes on, we find out the particulars of it. And this dinner is pretty much what they did, how we're going to handle it, how do we go from here. It says it's like chilling, shocking, unputdownable. It was not that for me. The first third was incredibly boring. Even after like the action gets started a bit, there's no tension. There wasn't, for me at least. It was just an example of like 3 out of 4 really awful parents and 2 awful children, and that's it. And none of the characters, like, it's fine if all the characters are going to be bad characters, but at least make them bad in an interesting way. That's that. Next on the list, we have Carrie by Stephen King. I did like this quite a bit more than my recent Stephen King reads, which were It and Cell. This focuses on a girl named Carrie who is in high school. She is bullied. She doesn't have any friends. Her mother is a like religious fanatic in her life, abusive. One day after gym period, Carrie gets her period for the first time. I think she's 16 years old. Not sure why she's getting it so late, but she does, and she has no idea what's going on. She thinks she's bleeding to death, and for some odd reason, this causes all the girls around her to start like throwing tampons at her. Thank goodness that real life isn't like a Stephen King novel. Carrie, one of the girls that did this to Carrie, feels bad about it, convinces her boyfriend to take Carrie to the prom. Prom night, something bad happens, a prank is pulled, and Carrie kind of goes nuts and obliterates everything. You get like little interviews or magazine articles that are interspersed with what's going on with Carrie in the present time. That was really good. That helped build up the tension a lot. It was way easier to read. Like, I did want to continue reading this one. I know when I was reading it, I was just like, I kind of want it to be over, but this one was much better. Enjoyed it much more. Thank goodness. Next on the list, we have A Heart So Fierce and Broken. This is the second book in a series. The first book, A Curse So Dark and Lonely, I really enjoyed. It's about a girl who gets pretty much sucked into another world. Beauty and the Beast retelling. There's this prince, Ren. They fall in love. He's under a curse. She has to help break it, yada, yada, yada. One of the reasons I really liked the first book was because the protagonist, Harper, is kind of like a go get him, do it yourself. I'm strong. I don't need your permission. I'm not crazy about this cliche, but the she's not like the other girls cliche, which sounds really kind of mushy when you put it in those terms, but when you're able to read that through a character, it typically works out pretty well. The first book was enjoyable. This second book, I unfortunately did not like near as much. It splits the POVs between four different POVs. We got Harper, Ren, we have Gray, and then another girl. I can't remember her name. She's a daughter of a queen. Supposedly this really tough kingdom. Her sister is this like fabled warrior, and she's like this delicate little flower where she does nothing. Her feelings get hurt all the time, and I understand what the author's trying to do. Like you're showing that she can't take care of herself, and then probably in the third book she's going to come into herself and she's going to mature and gain all that confidence, and that's great and stuff. But in this book, she was just really annoying, and the amount of times she blushed, she must have blushed like 50 times in this book, and that's just kind of a pet peeve of mine when you mention so much, like he looked at her and then she blushed, and I'm like, why is she blushing again? Does she do nothing else? I shouldn't be so hard on that book. I don't mean to go on and on about the negative aspects, because it is a fantasy book. I did like the fantasy elements of it. There were things to enjoy. It's just unfortunately from the first to the second book, it was quite a bit of a drop for me. Next on the list, When the Emperor Was Divine. As you can see, this is a very short book. This is set in California in the 1940s during World War II, when a lot of Japanese Americans were rounded up and then sent to camps in, I think, Nevada. The author has, I believe, personal like family experience with this. I think her grandfather was arrested, even though there was no evidence to say he was involved in anything. And her mother, I think, did spend time in an internment camp when she was a teenager. We follow in the book one family. We don't know any of their names. We just know them by father, mother, sister, brother, as they are kind of rounded up, sent to this camp, their experiences in the camp, and then after the war when they're able to return home. There are some passages in here that do hit hard in like a quiet manner. The writing is really nice. I think the author does a really good job of kind of subtly pushing emotion rather than just like shoving it down your throat. Yeah, this was really good. It again, it is so short that you can easily get through this in no time at all. So, especially since we don't, historically, I don't hear much about the Japanese internment camps that happened in the States. So next we have Black Cake. This book has been everywhere recently. Lots of hype about it. It is about a lot of people and a lot of things. We start the book with siblings Benny and Byron. Their mother has just passed away and they've come home for the funeral. Benny hasn't been in contact with her family for many years. We don't know exactly what happened. The mother, as part of her will, left several tapes for her children to listen to. And through these tapes, we go into different POVs in the past. I enjoyed this book as a whole. I did have some issues with the amount of POV. It's a lot. I'm just not a different POV person, and for me this was too many. I think by the end there was like 12 or 13. There could have been more different POVs, and when you're doing that from the past and the present, it can be a bit confusing. As a whole, I think the author did a pretty good job of kind of keeping the storyline tight so that you knew who you were with most of the time. You do have to kind of suspend your disbelief in this book for a few different reasons. I think the author wanted, in the end, like I said, we're showing so many different POVs, and I think that the author really likes kind of clean endings where they come together and there are reunions. There were a lot of reunions that just didn't feel like it would ever happen like that. Some of the big reveals that we get, as far as the unveiling of the character's identity, like this person is actually this person, we get several of those to the point where, to me, I was expecting it, because it mostly comes through the usage of this person had this name when they were living in Jamaica versus they took this name when they came to the US, or it was a nickname or something. And that works. It worked the first time, but I think the author did it like 4 times. So to me, by that point, I was just kind of like, yeah, I get that this is going to be someone that I actually know, that I've been reading about. I did really enjoy reading about the characters' lives when they were living in Jamaica. One character in particular who had a pretty tough life, lots of social issues. It does almost feel like it's a bit too much for one book. Like, I think the author was trying to just stuff so much into it that it became just a bit heavy. But for the most part, I did really enjoy it. Especially, I think this is the author's first novel. Yeah, same as this one. First novel. That's not bad at all. It did also really make me want to make a black cake. I actually went out and bought the fruit, and I have it I have it sitting in some wine and rum. So for Christmas, in like 6 months, maybe I'll make a black cake. Next on the list, we have Never Let Me Go. I have been wanting to read this book for a long time. This is about 3 people, Kathy, Ruth, and Tommy, and they attend a school called Hailsham. And initially it just kind of seems like a typical English boarding school. As you start to read, you discover they are kept pretty isolated, and they start using language that you don't quite understand. They're talking about donations and collections. You come to the realization that these are people who were created to be organ donors. So pretty much what happens is they donate all of their organs until they eventually die. So they do not typically have very long lives. What I did not expect, I knew that premise going in. What I didn't know was how aware they were. Like, it talks about in school that they're aware from a young age that this is what happens, even if they can't fully understand it, because it's never been completely explained to them, which I thought was really interesting. I thought it was going to be this shocking reveal, like, hey, you know, next week, guess what, you're not a person. Like, next week you're gonna give your heart to someone, then you're gonna die. And it wasn't. It was just this awareness continuing through the book. A very complicated relationship between 3 of the characters. It was good. I did enjoy it. I will say I didn't enjoy it quite as much as I thought I was going to. Books like that, for me, about kind of like your worth as a human, and you're in like that internal struggle as to like, what am I made to do? Am I worth what someone else is? Like, how society sees me. Those are things that are kind of guaranteed to get me emotional. And while I did feel things for the characters, and it was very sad, it wasn't to a degree that I thought it was going to be. Next on the list, we have The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. I have always been a big fan of Sylvia Plath's poetry. I did try to get into this book several years ago. I think I got a few chapters through and then stopped. So this book follows Esther, who's in college and wins a some sort of award internship to be able to go to New York with all these other girls, live in New York for a while, kind of this glamorous lifestyle, be introduced to all the important people in publishing. Maybe she can make connections, get a job, something like that. Esther deals with depression. This book is just pretty much a portrait of how depression can kind of take away your talent and your thirst for life and kind of turn you into like a shell of who you should be. So she's very talented, but she's always going back and forth between feeling like, yes, I can do everything, I really want this career, to everything is exhausting me so much that I can't even think about making a decision, to getting like really frozen and not being able to move forward. She is able, after the trip to New York, she does return home. Things get worse. She attempts suicide, she fails, and then she's sent to a mental institution that's supposed to help her recover. And the book ends, well, I won't say how the book ends because I don't want to spoil it if anyone has not read it. You don't read this book for the plot. You read it because Sylvia Plath just knows how to write. It does add something knowing that Sylvia Plath herself, like so much of this seems to be autobiographical, that she did eventually, lose her fight against depression and commit suicide. It does feel just really personal and really raw in the way she writes it. So yeah, it was really good. Next book on the list, we have The Almost Moon. This is the Alice Sebold. She's the author who wrote The Lovely Bones, which I think to this day is like one of the most beautifully written novels. I still remember passages from it just being like, oh, when you read that sentence, it's just like, yeah, that's a good sentence. This one has a great opening line. Let me read that to you. When all is said and done, killing my mother came easily. So this is pretty much about a relationship between a mother and daughter. The daughter kills her mother in the first line. And this is kind of like a 24-hour period, like right after she did it, of how she is reacting to it. Like, do I want to turn myself in? Who am I going to tell? Am I going to try and keep it a secret? Am I going to try and blame it on someone else? Just kind of like 24 hours of being in shock. Her mother is pretty much like was a narcissistic, kind of abusive, just horrible person. And she's older. She's, I think, in her 40s or 50s, the daughter is. And I just don't understand this kind of compulsion that family feels, that because this person is related to me by blood, I have to stay around and be miserable with them. Like I owe it to them because we share blood. I've never understood that. Like, this woman is awful to you. She's been awful to you her whole life. Like, go away, lose your phone number, don't communicate with her anymore. And instead she takes care of her mother as I think she's suffering through dementia. You want to feel bad for the protagonist, and you do for a bit, but then at one point in the book, she's like completely fine with having someone else take the fall for her, and so you lose any of that sympathy. This is what I've been having some trouble with books recently, is if you're going to give me like a dark book full of dark things, there's not really much light in there, just give me a little something. Like, give me a little light, give me a little brevity. If you don't, it's just kind of this like bog fest. I'm using it, this bog fest of like awfulness. And that can just get really kind of wearing, a full novel of that. I've been reading a lot of those lately. I'm completely fine with dark novels. I like dark novels, but just give me a little something in there to break up that tension once in a bit. But it was good. None of the characters I liked, but Oh well. Sometimes I don't know how to describe how I feel about these books, and I'll start talking about them. I'll be like, it doesn't sound like I like it at all, but I do. All right, next book on the list, we have The Maid. This is about a girl named Molly who's 25 who works at a hotel. She's a maid. She loves her job, loves cleaning, loves that she's kind of able to be nobody when she's cleaning. People don't pay attention to her. She's kind of able to lose herself in the rhythmic quality of the work. She takes things very literally. And she is naive to the point where people take kind of horrible advantage of her. One day she's cleaning her rooms and she finds the dead body of Mr. Black. Mr. and Mrs. Black have been visiting the hotel for many years, and Molly always takes care of them when they do visit. She always takes care of their room. She is friends with Mrs. Black, but nobody really knows. After some miscommunications and a few wrong turns, Molly finds herself the primary suspect in Mr. Black's murder case. The rest of the book is pretty much finding out who killed him and who is trying to set her up. Like I said, people do take just terrible advantage of her, so that's kind of heartbreaking. But then she does get a few people in her corner about halfway through the book, and they're able to come up with this plan, like maybe we can actually prove that I'm innocent. Towards the end, it did get a bit too sappy for my taste. Next, we have The Hero of Ages by Brando Sando. This is the third book in the Mistborn series. Finally finished. I started this book a while ago and I got like 80% of the way through and then I just stopped. So I did do this book, I will say, a disservice by doing that. Like, I probably should have started from the very beginning, but I just did not want to do that. So I just kept going where I was. This is the first Brandon Sanderson series I've ever read. Book one, I might have talked about this on a different video. If so, I'm doing it again. Book one, I remember I read like a few pages and I'm like, okay, yep, I gotta order book two now because I'm gonna get through this real fast. It's a really good fantasy series. It's a really solid fantasy series. Good magic system, interesting world, great characters. Out of all the fantasy authors, I think he writes the female characters really well. The ending was not what I was expecting. It was a certain type of ending. I still can't figure out if I like it or not. Yep. That's all I'm gonna say. But I am very glad to finally be finished with this series. Good book, good series. If you're trying to just start Brandon Sanderson, I'd say The Mistborn is probably a good way to go. Last book on the list, number one. Is this number one? I have had complicated feelings about a lot of these books. Picture of Dorian Gray. This book follows three men. We've got Basil, who's a painter. We've got Lord Henry, who's an aristocrat, doesn't seem to do much except talk. And then we have Dorian Gray, who is up there in society. I don't know if he's a lord or something, but he is the model for Basil. It was a bit funnier than I expected it to be because at one point, Basil is complaining to Lord Henry. He's like, you know, Dorian Gray, he's a very attractive person and he's put all of himself into this painting and he's put too much into this painting and he doesn't, I think he doesn't want to sell it or can't part with it because the artist has put so much of himself into the work. And Lord Henry's like, well, that can't be true because you said that this Dorian Gray character is attractive and you're you. And to backtrack, he's kind of like, oh, but to be ugly is a good thing for an artist because if you're pretty, it means there's nothing like going on in your head and all the greatest thinkers are ugly, so you're completely fine. And it continues with these three men just like giving each other the most outlandish compliments. It really made me laugh, like just the way that they seem to butter each other up. Basil and Lord Henry are kind of like the cartoons of like the good and the bad, the angel and the demon on your shoulder. They're kind of like that, where Basil is always trying to prompt Dorian in a positive way and get him to become a beneficial member of society. And Lord Henry is kind of like likes to stir up trouble just to see what happens because it's entertaining. I think he might be like a sociopath. He says things like, you know, I hope you fall in love with this girl, marry her, and then fall out of love with her, because that would be fun to see. Dorian is very self-absorbed. He falls in love with an actress who loves him in return. He brings his friends to see her perform one night, and because she has discovered that she loves Dorian more than she loves acting, she performs very badly because she no longer has that fervor for acting. It's now for Dorian, and he's so embarrassed by her that he breaks off the engagement and is like, I wish I had never met you. And she ends up killing herself, and he feels bad for about 2 seconds, and then he starts to go on about how selfish she was to kill herself and how she didn't think about him or anything like that. He's just the most self-absorbed character ever, to the extreme. But this painting that Basil did of Dorian keeps locked away because he discovers that rather than him physically take on kind of the impact of his decisions, the painting does. So when he is really greedy in a situation, his own face won't change. The face in the painting, though, will get like an ugly sneer or something like that. And as time starts to go by, instead of him aging, the painting ages. So he takes this kind of as permission to act as terribly as he wishes, because it's not impacting him physically. The rest of the book is pretty much how far he'll go to keep this painting a secret from the people around him. It's just a really interesting study in kind of beauty and vanity and art and love and obsession, and you know, how what people are on the surface doesn't match who they actually are in actions. It has some really good one-liners in there. It also has some really terrible one-liners about women. Yeah, pretty much every woman in this book is kind of portrayed as being either idiotic or like a plaything. I would have liked it a lot better if it wasn't that, if it didn't have some, you know, anti-Semitic tones to it as well. That's the difficulty I have with reading these older books, is I'm not sure how the author intends this. But I will say I did enjoy it quite a bit. Yeah. Picture of Dorian Gray. Finally got around to it. I should have probably read it when I was in, you know, high school or college, but that's it, guys. That's the books I read in May. I'm going to have a haul coming up soon, so keep an eye out for that. I hope you guys enjoyed this, though. Hope you have a great rest of your week, great rest of your day. Just have a nice day. Read a nice book. There you go. Your day will get better. Bye, guys.